like for you to meet Kevin Ellis. Kevin was a Marine. Kevin was a young man. Kevin's bone density was down. And so what are you told when your bone density is down? Here's Fosamax, here's your drugs. Take these, come back when I tell you. And he was not taking that for an answer. He dug into the literature. He started to really figure out why one's bone density would go down, fixed it for himself. Again, you're starting to see a theme. Love that kind of story, and has helped a lot of people figure it out for themselves. Enjoy. Kevin, welcome. It's good to see you.
Dr. Pater, it's great to be here. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, man, you've helped a lot of my students, my patients. It's, the word is scary when the doctor says, "Oh man, you got osteoporosis," and people freak out about it. They freak out about their T scores. And look, you have a solution. You have been helping people with this, and it has nothing to do with the meds. It has nothing to do with the stuff that they're being told. And most people I've talked to haven't heard of what y'all are doing in a way that can meaningfully help their lives. So I was really happy to share you with my audience. So welcome.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, I would say too, bones are almost like a forgotten organ sometimes. We do all this other stuff to improve our health, but we don't really think of our bones as something that we need to take care of until later in life, right? Most people are thinking about their mother, their grandmother. They heard that they had fractures and that it significantly impacted their quality of life later on, or maybe that they were hunched over or in a wheelchair or something like that. And that's not the way life should be lived as we get into our later years. They should be the best years that we're having and experiencing and going on all those bucket list adventures that we wanted to. But you can't get there if you don't preserve and strengthen the structure that's going to carry you to an active future. So that's why I love what we do at Bone Coach.
So you're a young, healthy looking dude. How'd you get into this mess?
Well, like most people in the health space, it started with my own personal health journey. And I would take my health journey back to when my father passed away from cancer when I was 2 months old. And, I was just a baby at the time, didn't know him. My mother was 5 months pregnant with me. He was told he had cancer. And 2 months after I was born, he passed away. So my entire life, I had this fear, this underlying fear that 35 was my latest expiration date. That was when he died. He was 35 years old. He was so young. And all time could do was slow up or speed down the descent into the hourglass. That's exactly how I felt. And as I was growing up, he was a Marine, so I knew I was going to be a Marine and follow in his footsteps to make him proud. And I went in the Marine Corps, but when I got out, I started having all these different health issues. I had high stress, I had poor sleep, I had chronic digestive issues, I had low energy and fatigue. Some days I could barely even get out of bed. Some days, and I was then diagnosed with celiac disease. So, celiac disease, for those who aren't familiar, which you may be, but if you aren't, it's an autoimmune condition where when you ingest gluten, it damages the villi, these tiny little nutrient absorption centers in your small intestine, and it blunts them to where they can't do their job. They can't absorb these nutrients. So, for me, my body was taking in these nutrients. I couldn't absorb them, specifically calcium, the primary mineral constituent of your bones. Your body still needs these nutrients to execute its daily functions. I wasn't getting them. So what was my body doing? It was going to the bones, the largest reserve of minerals that we have, and it was pulling from there. And that led to bone loss and osteoporosis, right around my 30 years old. So for me, I was this tough Marine, not thinking anything's wrong with my bones, even though I had other health issues. And all the other doctors that I had gone to, none of them were like, hey, we should check out your bones, or has anybody done a bone density scan on you, until a physician's assistant asked me that. And I'm thinking, nothing's going to be wrong with mine. I'm good. And the results came back, and they sent me a letter in the mail and said, you have osteoporosis. Go on a gluten-free diet. That was the extent of the treatment plan. And I went and I got a second opinion. And then it was medication and fracture were my future. And that was when I was like, I need to figure this out so I don't follow in the footsteps of my father and, put my kids in that position. So I had a very strong impetus to make progress and improvement. And I did. And I went on to decide I want to take the same energy and effort and enthusiasm and leadership that I had in the Marine Corps and apply it to the health space. And now we've helped hundreds of thousands of people, through Bone Coach and our programs.
Amazing. So you found through, obviously for you, you had a specific condition that was compromising your absorption. That's not everybody. So what did you dig up as you started looking at why people were getting osteoporosis?
Well, there are a variety of reasons why this can happen. Now, primary osteoporosis, and by the way, osteoporosis, that's porous bone. That's the condition that's characterized by either not enough bone formation, excessive bone loss, or it's a combination of the two of those things. And in osteoporosis, both your bone density and your bone quality are reduced, and that puts you at greater risk of fracture. Is fracture guaranteed? Absolutely not. But are you at greater risk if you're losing bone? Of course you are. So the, there's primary osteoporosis that typically occurs as a result of the decrease in estrogen in postmenopausal women. Estrogen has a protective effect on bone. As those levels decrease, as they do during menopause, that increases the activity level of cells that are breaking down bone. Then there are other causes of osteoporosis and bone loss. That's called secondary osteoporosis. And this is where it occurs as a result of behaviors, disorders, diseases, conditions like celiac disease and malabsorption for me, or other factors that can lead to bone loss. So an important note to make here is just because you're a postmenopausal woman does not mean hormones are the sole cause of your bone loss. There could be other causes and contributing factors. And also, we have to understand that you also may not have built up enough bone in your younger years. 90% of your bone mass is put on by the time you turn age 18, and the remaining 10% fills in by the time you turn 30. So, if when you were younger, you had poor diet nutrition, you were drinking a bunch of sugary soft drinks and eating a bunch of candy and not getting vitamin D, vitamin K2, calcium, magnesium, if you led a sedentary lifestyle, if you weren't really active, you weren't playing sports, you weren't moving your body and your bones in these short, sharp, dynamic movements, stimulating new bone growth. Gymnastics is fantastic, by the way, for kids and grandkids. That's one of the best things you can do for bone density as a kid. But if you had an eating disorder when you were younger, if you smoked or drank excessively, if you took certain medications like glucocorticoids, prednisone, all of those things could have prevented you from achieving peak bone mass in what I call a full bucket. So just because you get a bone density scan and it says you have osteoporosis does not mean you have the full picture of what is causing or has caused that bone loss.
When you mention malabsorption, you figure, I mean, if you talk to the functional medicine guys, everyone's got leaky gut. So everyone has a compromised intestinal lining, everyone has endotoxemia, everyone's got a little bit of that happening inside of our maladapted guts to, all the stuff that's coming at us. You look at the literature, environmental toxins also lead to malabsorption. So, in your experience, having seen hundreds of thousands of people at this point, how much of it goes back to the gut? How much of it goes back to just poor nutrient intake? I'm just trying to get a sense of like relative percentages.
Yeah. Well, I mean, a big portion of the people that come to see us, they have digestive issues too. So oftentimes they do think they're eating healthy, but what we oftentimes find is that they're falling short in terms of in some pretty key nutrients. So protein is one of them. Your bones are 50% protein by volume. You need amino acids. That's one of the areas people typically fall short in. Calcium, magnesium, vitamin D3, vitamin K2, those are some other important ones. And I'll go more into the nutrients in just a minute, but vitamin C is another really important nutrient that a lot of people don't get enough of. But in terms of gut health, it's not just a matter of absorption when it comes to your bones. So, like I talked about, I gave the example of celiac disease, where you're taking in gluten, it's damaging the villi can't absorb the nutrients, your body needs the nutrients, it goes to the bones to get them. Then you have bone loss. So, absorption is one key. The other issue with digestive issues is that uh, Inside your bones are not just these static tissues that hold you upright and carry you through life. They do that and they do a good job of it, but they are living tissue. So inside your bones, you have bone marrow. 95% of the blood cells in your body are produced in the bone marrow. So if we're talking about preventing bleeding and clotting, platelets are going to help with that. If you were talking about carrying oxygen to the body's tissues, carrying carbon dioxide away from the tissues back to the lungs, red blood cells are going to help with that. But if we're talking about fighting infections, healing wounds, anything related to the immune system, that's where white blood cells come in. The cells that break down bone, osteoclasts, they're a form of white blood cell. So anything that's stimulating the immune system is speaking in the same language as the cells that break down bone. Where is 70% of your immune system reside?
Your gut.
In your gut,
Yep.
right? So it's not just a matter of are we absorbing the nutrients, it's are those digestive issues, that leaky gut, all those toxins, are they creating or stimulating the immune system and speaking in the same language as the cells that break down bone, leading to more bone loss?
That's fascinating. And so an epidemic in one place leads to a silent epidemic somewhere else.
Yeah. And it's also, we know this, it's not just the bones that are affected. It's just the bones are not really thought about in that process. We think about uh, issues with the immune system all the time and inflammation and leading to all these other health issues, but your bones are absolutely affected in this process too.
You think of the conditions that these kids are growing up in now, right? More sedentary, sugar cereals, very low protein intake. Some of them elect to be vegetarian or vegan. And, there's all sorts of, with those populations, you got to be very incredibly mindful to get more protein and amino acids on board. Um, it's almost like you're springing the trap for this thing pre-18. So, a couple generations back, we stopped, hoeing the farm or whatever we were doing. I'm assuming the numbers have gone up dramatically.
I think they'll continue to rise. And yeah, the lifestyle changes. People aren't out playing. Kids aren't out playing till dark, being called back in for dinner. They're sitting on their couches on the tablets with their necks slumped over, just looking at a screen. That's not going to be helpful. We need to get the kids up. We need to be active. We need to get them in sports. We need to get them doing gymnastics and get them to prioritize protein, whatever that looks like for you. You can, just because your kid says they don't want to eat a certain thing, if that's what's available, if that's what you made for dinner, they'll eventually come to eat what you're eating. You're also setting the example for them too. I'm actually very passionate about this. I have two young kids of my own, 5 and 7, and I also meet with people that are parents and grandparents, and this is a concern for them. They're in a position of, I have osteoporosis and bone loss. I want to take care of me, but I also want to be the shepherd for the other people in my life and help make sure that they don't get to this point too. So there are a lot of things that you can do to help support them in a young age.
So if I'm listening to you thinking, I grew up on Cocoa Pebbles and Atari, um, is there hope for me, right? Because you said most of the foundation was laid by 18, 10% maybe after that. How much can we effectively change that density? How much can we fix this problem in our adult years?
Yeah, you absolutely can make progress, make improvement, make changes, build bone density, improve bone quality, improve your bone strength. A couple notes I'll make. So bone density, there's something called a bone density scan, and that's what is going to tell you have osteoporosis, right? So you get this bone density scan, it tells you the mineral content of your bone, then it generates a score. The doctor is going to look at that score and say, hey, if it's +1 or -1, that's normal and healthy. If it's -1 to -2.5, that's osteopenia, which is what we would call low bone mass. And that's like a precursor to osteoporosis. And if it's -2.5 or lower, -2.6, -2.7, that's considered osteoporosis. Now, the greater the negative number becomes, the more severe the osteoporosis. But no matter where you are on that spectrum, you can still make progress and improvement. The piece of the picture most people don't have when they get that bone density scan is the quality piece. So the density is the mineral content of the bone. The quality piece is the structural integrity, the microarchitecture, how that bone is organized. Those two things combine to create bone strength. So you can get that quality part of the picture when you first get that bone density scan. There is a technology called TBS, trabecular bone score. That's like an add-on software to DEXA. You can ask to get that technology and call the facility ahead of time. Ask them if they have it available. If they do, you can get that piece of the picture too. But that's another thing that you can monitor over time. And the other thing that you can monitor over time to check for improvements is something called their bone turnover markers. And these are tests that look at the activity level of cells that are building up and breaking down your bone. So there's one called the serum CTX. That's the C-telopeptide test. That's the most sensitive marker for bone resorption or breakdown. And if that activity level is really high or elevated, that can be an indicator of active bone loss and a root cause issue that needs to be addressed. There's also a bone turnover marker called P1NP, procollagen type 1 N-terminal propeptide. That's the most sensitive marker for bone formation. So we can look at the activity level of these cells as leading and near-term indicators of what's going on in between these bone density scans. The reason I'm bringing these things up is you don't just have to guess if the things that you're doing are actually making an impact. You can look at some of these markers and see, is bone resorption coming down? Is bone formation coming up? Is the ratio between the two improving? And are you starting to move in the right direction before you get to that bone density, bone quality scans? But even at the 1 year, 1.5 year, 2 year marks, you can start to see improvements in those scans for bone density and bone quality as well. And there are a lot of things that you can do, and we can talk very specifically about what those things are to make improvement in building bone strength.
Seems like the DEXA scoreboard has now become a dashboard with multiple gauges. Yeah, I'm curious. We don't have to go too far into the weeds, but if you have too much reabsorption, what is the strat? What are the levers to pull? If you want to build up the matrix, are you going on a vibrational plate? Like, just curious about the interventions and
Yeah.
what you see moving the needles, I guess.
Yeah, of course. So if somebody has really high osteoclast activity, that serum CTX is really high, they're losing a lot of bone, something is contributing to that loss. So the first thing that has to happen is figure out what's contributing to that bone loss. What is the root cause issue behind it? So once you can figure that out, you can start addressing those things. Is it related to just hormones? Hormones obviously play a role. And, for some women, it's considering bioidentical hormone replacement therapy. For others, if that's not the right fit for them, it's looking to see what are the other causes and contributors that are either things that you're actively putting into your body, like a medication or maybe some kind of toxin or something like that in your environment that you need to get rid of, or it's something that's already existing within that needs to be addressed. So those are the most important primary levers that have to be looked at for bringing that bone resorption down.
Question on that
Now,
before we go to the next category. You hear a lot
yeah, of
about
course.
carbonated sugary drinks. You hear a lot about carbonated water and the effects. How much of that is moving the needle? How much of that are you seeing as contributors to the reabsorption?
Yeah, the carbonated waters aren't going to really play that much of a role unless it's a carbonated sugary beverage like a soda or something like that that has phosphoric acid in it. That's going to deplete your bones. But if it's just carbonated water, something like a Gerolsteiner or something like that, and you're doing that a couple times a week, that's not going to be a big deal.
That's great. I've
Um,
heard people bicker about that, and I've never seen the science to support it.
yep, I haven't either. The other side now. So if we go to the side of bone formation, we can take in, we'll talk about the nutrients in a second, but we can take in all the nutrients. We can fix the gut. We can do all that stuff. We can make sure we're absorbing. But if you are not providing the stimulus that your bones need to become stronger, they will not become stronger. So now that's where we have to bring in exercise as the one of the number one interventions that you have to be doing if you want to build stronger bones. And there are different types of exercise. And what bone needs is two different types of stimuli. You need muscle pulling on bone and you need impact. The most effective interventions are going to use one or both of those in combination. Okay. So a lot of people are just told when they go to their doctors, take some calcium, take some vitamin D, go for a walk. Here's your bone drug. We'll see you in 2 years for your next bone density scan. That's woefully inadequate. It's not enough. And walking specifically is not enough to support healthy bones. Is it important? Yes. And should you be walking every day? Of course. But it's not going to be the only thing that you can do. Because think about it. If you're walking, where is that impact taking place? Only on your lower half. Is it a dynamic impact? Is it coming from different angles, or is it in the same direction every single step that you're taking? Right. So that's one reason why it's not going to be enough. You have to have weight bearing exercise and resistance training as part of your plan. So, weight bearing exercise, that's where your body and your bones are working against gravity to keep you upright. There are things that you're doing on your feet, and they're placing a good, healthy stress on the bones. So, that's where walking is included in that. Walking, hiking, jogging, gardening, keeping up, playing with the kids, the grandkids in the yard outside, pickleball, tennis, yoga, Pilates, Tai Chi, Qigong. All of those things fall in that weight bearing category. So that's one thing. If you're doing those things, keep doing them, right? That's good. There's also non weight bearing exercise, though. And these are where your body and your bones are not working against gravity to keep you upright. So they're not placing that good, healthy stress on your bones. What would those be? Swimming is the number one there. So if all you're doing every single week or every day is getting in the pool, you're swimming a little bit, you get out, you're like, that's it for my exercise, I've done great. You haven't. You have to include the other form of exercise I'm going to talk about in a minute, which is resistance training. And it's not to say if you like to swim and it brings you joy and it reduces your stress and makes you happy, keep doing it by all means, but don't count that as the only form of exercise that you're doing. Okay. And cycling is another one, long distance cycling and things like that. You still have to get on your feet, put some good, healthy stress on your bones. Now let's get into resistance training and muscle strengthening exercise. This is the key part of this plan right here. And this is where we're bringing in, could be barbells or dumbbells, or if you're more comfortable with the machines at the gym, or I really like variable resistance bands. I like those. And some of the best exercises to incorporate for your bone health: squats, deadlifts, overhead presses, doing some drop landings, box jumps, those kinds of things can be really helpful. But those are movements that are moving lots of different parts of your body at the same time. And I know if you're not familiar with exercising or even deadlift, like that's one that people hear that and they're like, oh my gosh, that sounds terrifying. It doesn't have to be. You can learn the proper form. You can work with somebody to help you figure out the proper form, look at your body mechanics. And you don't have to start with the bodybuilder heavy weight from the start. You start with a lower weight with good form, and you slowly progress up to where you can provide that stimulus your body, your bones need to become stronger, which is in that 5 to 10 repetition range, is a great place to be. So those are some great exercises, very specific, that you can take away from this and say, okay, if there are things that I'm going to start implementing today, though, it can be those exercises specifically.
And if you're looking for leverage in life, it's important to note that those exercises happen to also help increase muscle mass, mitochondria, give you more energy, push your testosterone, make you a happier human on planet Earth, and all the other benefits. It's like you should just be doing them anyways. And the bone growth is just one more reason to say, this is the obvious move. Everyone should be moving their bodies in this way, period. And if you're not functionally fit enough, you work your way up to it, like Kevin said.
Yep, absolutely agree.
So you'd mentioned nutrition and the nutrients needed on this side of the ledger. So now we've kind of taken away some of the liabilities. Now we're kind of building assets. What does that look like in terms of what we're eating, how we're eating it? And, that you start to get into the nutrition fight. It's like, well, you don't take this calcium, you take this magnesium calcium. And people are just wrestling all the time. So I'm curious, because you're looking at everyone's lab data. What
Yeah.
works? Well, I hope you're enjoying this. I hope you're enjoying this interview. Kevin is a sincere guy. He's been helping a lot of people. I'm a big fan of the work he's done. If you have not upgraded yet to the full package, please do so. You will get this interview, you will get the transcripts, you'll get the audio. You will also get everything else you've seen in the summit and a ton of bonus resources that will help you find vitality in your life. Again, it's a no brainer. Upgrade now.
Yeah. Well, let's start with a couple really important nutrients that most people already hear are important for your health and for your bones, but I'm just going to give it another vote here. Vitamin D is critically important for your health and for your bones. And if you are in those colder weather months, the sun's rays are not going to generate enough vitamin D production. So supplementing is probably going to be helpful. Now, before you go supplement randomly with vitamin D, it is a hormone, it's not just a vitamin. So get the 25 hydroxy vitamin D test through your doctor. Look at where your levels are at. If you're in the US, that range is really wide for normal. It's like 30 to 100 ngml. And if you're at 30, you're going to be told that's normal, right? If you're at 98, you're going to be told that's normal. So you need to know, you need to come a little bit closer to center, right? And then if you're low or below those numbers, you definitely need to boost them up, boost them up, pardon me. And just know that, again, if you're in winter, you're probably going to want to supplement in addition to the foods that you're bringing in. So the foods that you can bring in, those would be like, I don't know, fatty fish is one source. You could do eggs, mushrooms could be another source, though that's D2. But you want to make sure you're getting enough vitamin D. So that's one. Uh, the next one that's really important, another fat soluble nutrient. So you want to take this with fat, with a meal, is vitamin K2. Now, a lot of people have heard of vitamin K. K1 can be converted to K2, not too efficiently. K2 is what's most important for your bones. So K2 is helping activate something called osteocalcin and matrix GLA protein. This is helping make sure that calcium that you're taking in is actually going to the bones to help support bone building and not to the soft tissues like the kidneys and the arteries, which is going to cause a lot of health issues down the road, right? So K2 is very important. You can get it from dietary sources. So if we're talking about vitamin K1, you're going to get it from your dark green leafy vegetables, asparagus, broccoli, chard, those kinds of things. If you're talking about K2 and you're looking at food sources of K2, there's different forms of it, but MK4 you're going to get from beef liver, grass-fed ghee, butter, dark meat, pastured egg yolks, emu oil. Those are all your K2 MK4s. And K2 MK7 you can get from hard cheeses, fermented foods, sauerkraut, kimchi, natto. Natto is actually one of the highest sources of that. It's not going to be the most flavorful thing, but and then also bacterial fermentation in our guts. So there are ways to get vitamin K2, but you can also supplement with that as well. But I always encourage people, start with your diet and nutrition first, and then close the gaps with supplementation if and when necessary. So especially when it comes to things like calcium, because for calcium, a lot of people ask me, are you for or against calcium or like calcium supplementation? If you can get it through diet and nutrition first, do that. A lot of times people have issues with nutrient absorption or they just can't seem to get enough in their diet. In those cases, you can supplement, but if you're supplementing, you're not doing it more than 500 milligrams a day, absolute max. Because if you're doing that, you're increasing your cardiovascular disease risk, you're increasing your risk of kidney stones, and that's just not a good place to be. In terms of forms of calcium, calcium citrate has probably the most studies behind it, the greatest safety record behind it. In MCHC calcium, microcrystalline hydroxyapatite calcium, that is like bone meal. That's a great form of calcium because it's not just calcium, it's got protein and growth factors and other things in it too. But if somebody has poor stomach acid, they might have a hard time with that MCHC form of calcium. So citrate or malate or another form of calcium paired with an organic acid, that could be a more absorbable form for them that doesn't require as much stomach acid. So, and then vitamin C. Vitamin C is, I think we all hear about vitamin C and how important it is for our health. It's also important for your bones. The reason for that is your bones are a collagen protein matrix structure upon which these minerals are laid. Vitamin C stimulates procollagen, it enhances collagen synthesis, and it stimulates something called alkaline phosphatase activity, which is a marker for bone building cell formation. So you need vitamin C. And then the other side of it is if you're not getting enough longer term, you're going to increase your risk of fracture. So you get it from your food first if you can. Berries, citrus fruits, those kinds of things can be really helpful. But also, you can get it from veggies and you can supplement too if you need to.
So I know someone right now listening to us took notes, is going to go on to Amazon, order that stuff and say, let's play, let's make a deal. I'll get all this stuff and take it. That's about as willing as I am to participate in my bone health. But I'm not doing any
Mm-hmm.
deadlifts, man. That sounds like too much work. I'm not going to do the weight bearing stuff. That's not built into my habit stack. But I'll take a bunch of supplements, maybe some calcium. Um, that should be enough, right? And that's what I see a lot in clinical care. I see a lot of people kind of do half the prescription.
Yeah.
Is that half the results or is that 5% of the results, right? Like I want to just level set with people who do that all the time.
Yeah. If you, at best, if all you're doing is just supplementing and you're not doing the exercise port, at best, you might have a slow decline, or maybe be able to maintain, right? But you have to do the exercise portion of this. You have to. And yes, I get it. I hear people out there saying, I have back pain or my neck hurts, my shoulder hurts. There are modifications, adjustments, and tweaks that you can make to exercise to where you can still do something and still provide some of that stimulus. So you're not just doing nothing. Like I get it. Pain can compromise your body mechanics. It can put you at greater risk of injury, but there are ways around those things. So, but I understand what you're saying. If it's not easy and if it's not just a pill in a bottle, then people aren't going to do it. This is not one of those things. If you already have osteoporosis, do not think that you can just out supplement this. You have to put in the work, and the work doesn't have to take over your entire life. The things I just talked about, the squats, the deadlifts, the overhead presses, you could provide that stimulus 2 to 3 times a week, get in a good 10, 15-minute exercise 2 to 3 times a week. If that's all you can put in, great. That's so much better. And you can't tell me you don't have 10 minutes. You don't have 15 minutes. It's there. Are you willing to put in the work?
Yeah, it's
And
a question of redistribution, right?
yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And when it comes to just one other point on that is like are you willing to put in the work? You have to have a solid reason why. And you have to move toward whatever that why is. Like I always encourage people, you don't have to know where every step is placed day one. You just have to know where you want your path to lead and why you want to get there. So for me, when I was first told I had osteoporosis back when I was 30 years old, my why was I wanted to dance with my daughter on her wedding day. And that is still in my head today. I'm going to be there. I'm going to be doing flips with her on that day, right? That is my why. And there's nothing that can come against that. You have to figure out what is your why. Why is it important for you to live an extra 10, 20, 30 years longer? Because that's what this can do if you take care of your skeleton.
Good man. Before I leave the let's make a deal category, some people are like, well, it's in my family history, it's my genetics, and the doctor said there's nothing you can do about it. Here's your pills, right? And they are willing to just get overwhelmed by the doctor's advice because obviously it's your genetics, and so just shut up and take the pill. This is what we do. This is standard of care. What's your response to that?
Yeah. Well, number one, genetics do play a role, right? But they're not the destiny. They don't. There are so many things that you can do. You can help your genes express themselves more favorably, and there are a lot of things that you can do that are beyond just what the doctor will tell you in the office. And I'm not saying that all doctors, that are in the office, they want to see their patients get better a lot of times, but the system that they're in and the guidance they're providing under that system is not designed to help you achieve your best possible health outcome. So I just said the standard recommendation for 90% of the people I see is that they've received: take some calcium, take some vitamin D, go for a walk, take this bone drug, and we'll see you in 2 years for your next bone density scan. When it comes to these bone medications that will be proposed, if you are going to your conventional physician and you're having a conversation, know that the tool that they have in their toolkit to help you at the end of that conversation, it is a pharmaceutical. And I would liken the use of these drugs to that old economic adage: there's no such thing as a free lunch. There are risks and side effects and short and long term implications with everything that you do, including taking these medications. It's not like taking, an aspirin. These have a dramatic effect on bone physiology too. There are different categories of drugs. There are anti-resorptives, there are anabolics. Under the anti-resorptives, there are bisphosphonates, which a lot of people have heard of, and there are rank ligand inhibitors. Under the bisphosphonates, Fosamax is one that a lot of people are familiar with and have heard about, or maybe they know somebody who's taken it. The safety and efficacy of those bisphosphonates is not really well known beyond 5 years. And as you and I are going about our daily lives, doing our daily activities, working out, doing chores around the house, you're starting to get these tiny little micro cracks and micro fractures in your bones. That's normal for every single person. It happens all the time. And then what happens is we have cells within the bone that they're called osteocytes that sense that damage, and they send out a signal and they say, hey, we need to become stronger. And there's these other cells called osteoclasts and osteoblasts that receive that message, and they come in and they scoop out that damaged bone, and the osteoblasts come and fill stronger, healthier bone in. That is normal bone remodeling process. That's supposed to happen. When you take some of these medications, especially for multiple years, you can start to slow down that activity level too much to where you accumulate that old, worn, damaged, weakened bone over time. So even if you're taking one of those medications and the bone density shows as being higher, or that your bone density is better, remember the structural integrity may not be. So the bone may not actually be stronger, maybe weaker bone. So that's why I think it was important for you to understand it's not just about the density and the mineral content. It's about the quality and the structural integrity. How do you get better structural integrity? How do you build better microarchitecture? Exercise. Got to exercise.
So this leads to a somewhat political question in that, okay, I need to go to this gatekeeper to get my DEXA scan and the 4 other tests that you recommended. And I got to ask him to get this thing and tell him why. And knowing that his hurry up and get out of my office algorithm is do this thing, here's your Fosamax. So, how does one navigate the getting the test and then shifting their algorithm to a different thing? Like, how do you broach this conversation with docs that usually don't even have time? I mean, they can be as well intentioned as can be. They don't have time for this.
Yeah. And this is actually, there's a statement that I have that I tell people to say to their doctors, and it's give me a year. This is the statement that I always wanted the patients to be able to go to their doctors and say, if it makes sense, but give me a year. And it's not saying, because again, that doctor has just recommended a medication. In that situation, if that's the only person you have to help move you forward in your healthcare, you need them at least to get some tests ordered. So, how do you not put a wall between you and that person? You say, hey, look, hands up. I'm not saying no, I'm just saying not yet. Can you help me get a little more information? Look, I'm just trying to make the most educated, informed decision for my health long term. I want you to be my advocate here. I want to work with you. Can you help me? Approach it like that. Even a doctor that has an ego can appreciate and respect that. No, you're not saying no to my opinion. You're just saying I want a little more information, right? They understand that. And that's when you can then present them, hey, I want to get these are the tests that I know are important, that for my health and for my bones. Can you help me get these tests? And that is the right way to try to move forward with that. Now, let's say in the very rare percentage of time that doesn't work, that approach doesn't work, then you can go outside. You can get the tests outside of those doctors without actually having a doctor. You can get those tests in a cost effective way. So you have options to get that information that you need.
That's great. That's great because the gatekeeper, yes, sometimes has the ego. Yes, can feel like they are, oh, what did you go to Doctor Google, right? And I know a lot of doctors that are very sensitive to that because there's also a lot of garbage on Google, and so they are
Yeah.
dealing with misinformation coming in every day and having to argue, for the science. But you must, I mean, I'm sure you have it on your website, like where you can get these tests as a consumer and order them without having to go through a gatekeeper.
Yep, we do all that stuff. We tell people how to get all the tests. And we give people like copy and paste messaging templates for their patient portals. We give you PDFs to take into your doctors to have those kinds of conversations. We list out the verbatim language. Just say this, just have them read this. Right. And it just makes that conversation so much easier because what you just said is they have patients every single day that bring into them a list of random things from Google. Now, some of these things may be very valid things, right? That they should be looked into. But if you're the doctor, and this is me putting myself in the doctor's shoes too, because I think we have to do that sometimes, is they see how many patients a day. Let's say they see one every 15 minutes and they work for 8 hours a day. They're seeing a lot of patients in one day. And if every single patient has a new list that they brought from Google and the majority of them are not on the mark, over time, they're just going to develop in their mind like, okay, this is just the approach. I can't look at this like, let me just do my protocol and move forward. So that's me putting myself in the doctor's shoes. Is that right? No, I don't think so. Like the patient is not getting the attention and the care that they need. But is that the way the system that you are going to, because you have insurance and you're going to your doctor, is that the system that you're going into trying to achieve a different outcome than they can provide you? That's exactly what it is. Right. So sometimes you have to go outside of that model. That's why we exist too. Right. That's why Dr. Paterman, that's why all the things you do, the way that you help people, and all the other people in the functional, integrative, natural health space, that's why we exist, because sometimes you have to go outside to get those additional resources that you need in that particular area.
Yeah, I mean, if you're trying to get maple syrup out of a bee's honeycomb, it's tough, right? So you got to know the translational gaps and understand how to get what you need out of the system. If not, you got to go out of the system, which will probably cost a couple more bucks, right? And that's
Yep.
that's just the way of things.
Yep.
Yep. Kevin, I think that this is extremely important and relevant for anyone who lives in a human body, frankly, because I think we're all starting to do this with our bone density. I'm in the gym 4 days a week and I'm worried about it just because lifestyle has become a lot more sedentary. I'm sitting here talking to you right now, right? Like I'm going to go get up and get, on my trampoline and do the things. How
Yep.
can people find out more about this? What's the best way to signpost them to your work?
Well, you can always find me at bonecoach.com. That's the best place to find me. We've got helpful resources. We've got a full Stronger Bones program over there called the Stronger Bones Solution. You can apply for that program if you want. Dr. Payton, what I'd love to do is if I have a free Stronger Bones masterclass too, and a bone healthy recipes guide.
I've had nothing but great feedback from people who I've sent your way. And so, whatever you're doing some good work and you're doing it right and you're doing it with a sincere approach. So, really appreciate you.
I appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. But we'll see you again.